In this hour of the show, guest with us today is a local historian, Caleb Haugago. Recently sent some music through to our new Upload site. You may have heard him on the Upload programme, which is on a Tuesday night. Caleb has written 3 books about Ipswich, and he does an Ipswich history podcast.
Now, when I first sat down to begin planning a podcast, I thought for the first episode it might be interesting to find out more about Basil Brown and his time excavating the Sutton Hoo ship burial, because he played a really key part in doing so, but it became quite overshadowed by the involvement of the British Museum and the Ministry of Works as they got involved when it was discovered just how important the finds were.
So that is just a little taster of Caleb's podcast. You'll have to go to it and listen to the whole thing if you want to find out more. It was, and Caleb's with us here, so thank you for coming in. Yeah. And was that what you sent in to Upload as well?
It was, yeah. I actually recorded it about 2 years or so ago, but then the technology slightly changed over the past few months, so you can actually host a podcast for free relatively easily now, and so I did that and added another one, and then I saw the Upload thing on the internet and just thought, well, I'll send it in.
Let's go.
Yeah.
And you featured on the programme, didn't you?
Yeah,
I think,
they
as well.
very kindly split it up into like 3 parts and played the whole thing, so I was very, very happy with that.
So before we do any more, is it a good mention for Upload, because this is brand new for us, and we've had introducing where people can upload new music for quite a long time, and the whole idea of this is really just if you're doing other stuff. I mean, there are so many people doing such wonderful things that it'd be great to feature them, and that's the whole idea of Upload. Was it easy to do? Or?
It was as simple as dragging a file into a box and clicking send, I think, really. So I think they got back to me to ask for some of the music so that they could edit it slightly. But apart from that, yeah. And I listened to it go out and all the other things that went, and it was fantastic, a real variety.
Yeah, and I mean, so if you're listening to this and you do a podcast, or maybe you just write or you do poetry, I mean, we need to be as broad for this as we possibly can, because basically we want your stories on the radio. It's your chance to make the radio, and that's what you did, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was brilliant.
And you're here now as well, look.
Yeah.
And did you get more people listen to your podcast, you know?
Yes, the stats did go up, actually. So yeah, I think I'm sure that was probably a direct result. So
tell me how, because this is Ipswich history, and particularly a sort of specialising it, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. Okay. So that first episode was about Basil Brown because on top of the very niche fascination I've got with Ipswich's history, I also find Basil Brown, the archaeologist...
He's amazing. Yeah. I wish I could have interviewed him. He's
absolutely amazing. I've met 2 people and interviewed them who knew him, and they both said such lovely things about him, and he just seems such a genuinely great guy. So yeah, he's a bit of a hero for me, and so I wanted to do the first episode about him, so that's kind of how it got started, really. So
explain how you came to be doing local history, because I've mentioned you've done 3 books, and I think we talked about one of them, but as Ipswich Through Town, Ipswich History Tour, Ipswich and 50 Builds, and I think the publisher, didn't they come to you first? It's not like you writing a book and then trying to persuade someone.
No, it's a case of a hobby getting out of control, really, is basically the story of the past 9 years or so for me. So in 2011, I started writing a local history blog, and a couple of years later, a publisher got in contact and asked me to write a book, and that's how it started, really.
But you must have to do the research, because it's one thing to write a blog, but you need to go away and do the history research in the first place.
Well, what happened with me was I studied history at university, and then off the back of that, I missed it when I graduated, and so I started researching local history to give myself something to write about, and like just those skills that I used at university, I put them to use in local history, really.
So I'm assuming that this was just a hobby and not making you money, was it?
Yes, yeah. I mean, the local history books now, I wouldn't say are, they're not like a primary source of income for me. I did them for the enjoyment, really, more than anything. And I kind of always seen them as like a stepping stone along with the blog, as just something interesting, like a hobby that I do, and just sort of see where it goes. And recently I've been asked to go on a Channel 4 TV programme to talk about local history, and you've asked me on here. I've started a podcast. I'm
not paying, just so you know that. Sadly, I don't have any money.
This is the problem with hobbies, isn't it? They do, yeah. So I'm one of those classic people that's got a hobby that's got...
So does it mean you have to do another job to pay for all of this?
Yes, so I still work at Ipswich Museums, so I've been working for them in various different roles since 2013. So, and I think, again, the blog was kind of one of the main reasons why I got my foot in the door there, because they were really sort of impressed with that when I went to the interview, and... So that's a good lesson for us. Hobbies can be good.
But that is quite history, isn't it? If you're working for Ipswich Museums, there must be history related. What do you do with them?
What do I do with them? I've done various roles. So I started off as a trainee there with an HLF-funded traineeship, doing documentation. I've done work on, I don't know if you remember, Salisbury Cathedral from the Meadows came to Ipswich. I was sort of an assistant for that. And then I went back and did more documentation, couldn't keep me away from that for a while. That's kind of been my first sort of passion, really, the documenting of the collections.
So you must have found some things that no one knew they had, haven't you?
Well, we would never admit that there was nothing that we didn't already know. No, I'm joking. So basically, because it's one of the oldest local authority museums in the country, and the Victorian curators, back in the bad old days, would perhaps not document things the way that we do now. So one of the jobs I had for a year and a half was helping to redocument a lot of those collections that needed some extra
because not everything is out on the shelves, is it?
No, I'd say probably less than half of the stuff that we've got in collection is on display.
Yeah. Now, who is it? We had someone who is a wonderful insect collector, and his collection is at the museum, and I've been allowed, but not to public, and I've been allowed to go and see some of those. Yeah. And you've got the Victorian stuffed animals collection. Yes. Ogilvy, that's the birds. Yes. Yeah, the birds.
Yeah,
as well.
Yeah, that's a really fantastic collection of British birds, all shot by one man, or we think shot by one man, and mounted by another. And the mounter's name was surname was Gunn, which was quite appropriate.
Very good. So well remembered as well. So that must be a fascinating job in itself.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, I've stayed there for 7 years, and I now. So my current job for the past couple of years has been working with schools and things on the sort of visitor services side of things. So taking kids and doing like Egyptian workshops and stuff with the collections, or things like that. So yeah, it's really varied, and I've really enjoyed it.
And that, I guess, that's passing on your enthusiasm to the youngsters for history, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Again, Basil Brown's another good example of, if you've got a passion for something, communicate it to others, and he did that with young people. Although I'm not trying to model my entire life on his, I think he's a good example of somebody who, you've got a passion for something, share it with other people.
So what are some of the fascinating facts about Basil that you can impart? Because I know that he would get on his bike, he would cycle right across the county, and he went to not just Sutton Hoo, he excavated a huge number of sites, didn't he, in Suffolk?
Basil Brown really put Suffolk archaeology on the map, which is a phrase I'm taking from Philip Wise, if you listen to the podcast, because he says that to me. Because he literally did do the first sort of surveys for the archaeology of the county, which has now become the basis of all the future sort of modern day records of where historic sites are that have been dug around Suffolk. He was really important in that respect. One of my favourite little stories about him that one of the people that I met told me was the fact that he had false teeth, and that when he laughed, sometimes they would fall out, and he'd actually have to pick them up and dust them off and put them back in his mouth again. I heard
that story as well, so it must be true.
Yeah, so yeah, he was a character.
There's going to be a film about Sutton Hoo coming up, isn't
there?
There
is
as well,
yes.
And I don't know how much we can say about it, but I think the person taking the part has been working quite hard at actually trying to ride the bike.
I have heard a little bit about it.
Yeah,
they did make some initial inquiries at the museum,
did
but
they as well?
I probably can't say too much.
No,
but,
I think neither of us can say too much at the moment, but hopefully at some point we'll learn more. So and the books that you've done, so mostly Ipswich, just because this is where you live, is it?
Yeah, that's just because that's where I really started out with it, really. I mean, my sort of specialism when I was at university was the English going over to colonise America in the 1600s. So I suppose there are some links there, because Ipswich and Suffolk was a big part of that, actually. But no, the sort of main focus for my research in the past, sort of almost a decade now, really has been local history, and that's turned into the books, really. So. And
you first, was it Ipswich Through Time? Was that the first one?
Ipswich Through Time was the first one, and that's sort of your classic then and now type.
So does that go right back? Because isn't Ipswich one of the oldest towns?
Yes, it is. So it's one of those controversial things. Lots of towns claim this, don't they? But you can say that.
But we're right.
Well, we're right. Obviously, we come from Suffolk, and that's really, Suffolk's really at the beginning of that Anglo-Saxon history, isn't it? And Ipswich is kind of, we think, the oldest continually inhabited town. So something like Colchester obviously was even a Roman settlement, but there was a period of where that wasn't lived in. Basically, it wasn't. People
inhabited. Went away before they came back again.
Yeah.
So Ipswich continually lived in. Yeah. The book Ipswich History Tour. So is that a sort of a tour?
Yeah, that was that's quite a sort of a slimline book, really. That's just kind of like a tool for people who want to have a walk around the town centre and get an idea for sort of snapshots of history of the town. So that's taking around to about 45 sites in the town centre. You can walk around it probably in, I don't know, an hour and a half or something like that. or you can read it from home, obviously, as well. And there's loads of nice photographs and images and stuff that I put in there from illustrations. And
if you start looking up in Ipswich, it is fascinating, isn't it? Because there are a real variety of old buildings.
There is, and I mean, you're probably aware of Borin Van Loon's website, where he does all the street writing and stuff like that. He's got a really encyclopedic website, which I would encourage anyone to go on, because it's really fascinating. But he documents all this stuff. You look above the shop front level, and there's just incredible things.
See some old adverts and all sorts, can't you? The old
Yeah.
paintwork on the bricks and things.
Yeah.
So he's got an interesting name. So Hauger is an interesting name, isn't it?
Well, yes. So I'll the pronunciation is Haujigo.
Thank you. I've got it wrong all along.
That's okay. Don't worry about it, because
it should be really Haujigo.
Yeah. It's basically the first part of any conversation I have with anybody that I first meet for the first time.
You should have said it earlier.
Don't
you
worry.
Have told me. You could have gone, excuse me.
When you've got a name like this, you get used to it after a while.
So how'd you go? So tell me more.
Yeah. What about the surname?
About your name, yeah.
Well,
as a historian, I bet you have.
I have looked into it, and obviously it's a question I get asked a lot. There's sort of two main theories that I think are sort of credible. One of them is from Charlie Haylock, and I went on his website and was looking at his surname database, and I think his was the origin being like an Anglo-Saxon one, which is Hay-Ho. And the other one, which I personally think is more probable, but I don't know for sure, is to do with the Huguenots, the Protestant group that sort of were exiled from, or basically had to leave France. And came and lived in England, that seems quite. I mean, how'd you go, Huguenot? You can imagine with the spellings of the time and the way there was no fixed spelling for anything in the 1600s. That seemed, and again, East Anglia. They came to East Anglia. It seems to make sense to me.
Okay, so you could have been originally a Huguenot,
possibly. Yeah.
So it was that Huguenot, the how'd you go?
Yeah, you can see how this sort of Mongolisation of the language or whatever can happen. Yeah,
it's a fascinating name though. So is it fairly Suffolk then? Have you
very
met other
much,
yeah.
No, so East Essex and Suffolk, particularly Norfolk a bit. That's the sort of the main hotspot for it, really. Yeah,
not that many Calebs either, are they? But it's quite
there
an old
are
name,
now.
isn't it?
It's a strange thing. Knowing all these school workshops for years, I was like the only Caleb I knew
in the world.
And now every other week I hear a little Caleb. I look around in the shop, in the museum, expecting it to be me, and it's a little child that's being called by their mother.
So at last, people have caught on, and
well, trailblazer, obviously.
On the Sofa with Lesley Dolphin on BBC Radio Suffolk.
Caleb Haujigo is my guest with us today, local historian. It's been fascinating. I love the way you got into history, really, because you weren't that academically thrilled at school, but then suddenly discovered that you could do history. Is that right?
Yeah. So I was certainly a sort of CD student throughout my time at high school and primary school, and I think it was just, for me, the moment when I sort of realised actually I can do this was an exam that I had to resit. I was learning about Mussolini and fascist Italy, and I got a D in the first exam I sat, and I was really determined to turn it around.
Isn't it, really?
Well, it was the teacher saying, right, you need to resit this, and that was when I was doing AS levels, so sort of year 12 at sixth form, and I just remember really trying really, really hard, and doing all the revision, just going to all the sort of extra outside of school revision sessions and everything. And then I turned it around, and I think I dropped 2 marks out of 120 on the next time I did the exam. And it was the first time that I got an A in anything, and I had this A in history, AS level, and I just sort of, going from D to A, I just thought, actually, I can do this if I actually work. And that was kind of the moment for me where it sort of clicked.
Isn't that really interesting? Because when you're at school, you're there because you're meant to be, aren't you? And I don't know how, it's such a tough thing for teachers to get you to realise that, it should be interesting. Did you find that you found it interesting as well?
I
when
did
you started
find it interesting.
To get into
I wouldn't say that I was a particularly naughty student at school or anything, but I just was always put in sort of mid-level set groups and kind of always just thought, well, C's what I'm meant to get, and I think that's the first time when I got an A on that paper that I'd ever got an A in anything at school ever, and I think that just changes you. It's about aspiration, isn't it? You often hear that about schools, raising the level of aspiration, and it is when you have something to aim for and you think, I can achieve this.
Wow, I am capable.
Yeah, and I think that, if you have that moment, then it can really, change.
I'd love to have seen your face. Did you open an envelope?
Well, I remember I got home, it was when I just got home from a family holiday in the Republic of Ireland, I think, and I came and, the letter was through the door, picked it up and looked at the results and just couldn't believe it. It's like, how old I would have been, about sort of 17 or something. It was the first time I got an A in anything. So it was it was a special moment, actually. I mean, it did change things, actually, for me.
And so did it change what it meant you, I mean, I guess you've always loved history because of that, in a way. Because
I loved history even before that. I mean, it was always my favourite subject at school, and it was kind of those moments of discovering at sixth form when you actually dedicate yourself to studying and you sort of start achieving things. I had never thought I would go to university or study history, anything like that at all. And I don't think wouldn't say that my parents or family particularly thought I was going to go to university or anything either. So after a year of work, I hadn't applied.
You went out to work, didn't you?
Yeah, I hadn't applied to go to university. I basically worked in retail in Jessop's, the camera shop, for a year, and was just like, well, maybe I should try studying because it might be a bit different than doing retail for a year. So, that's kind of what happened, really.
And are you glad you did?
I'm very glad I did. Yeah, I'm very glad I did. Absolutely, people always say this about university, don't they? But 3 of the best years of my life, and, it's an amazing experience.
Did you, because I don't think you ever had a real plan as to, like lots of us, as to what job you were going to do.
No, not at
did
all.
that help at university, or did you still come up not just knowing you love history, but not?
I think when I was at university, I had the idea that I thought I'd probably be a history teacher. I started doing work, doing sort of mentoring with sort of rural schools in Norfolk, because I studied at the University of East Anglia. And then when I came out, I became a teaching assistant and thought, I'll probably become a history teacher. But I just I think after a while I just realised it wasn't for me, and not because I don't think it's an amazing job. It's such a brilliant thing to do, to teach children like
to
this
inspire
skills.
young people.
Absolutely it is.
Yeah.
But I don't, just for some reason I saw this advert for a traineeship at the museum after having been a teaching assistant for 3 years, and I just thought, I'm just going to go for this and try it, and I just loved it. And that initial year I spent at the museum the first time, I was loved it so much that I've kind of stuck around in museums.
So you knew that was your play. Sometimes you do know, don't you? You
yeah,
start
it just
something
clicks,
and
doesn't
you
it?
know that is it really, and that's what you were meant to be. So do you know what long term? What would your ambitions be long term?
I think in my head I kind of have an idea that I would like to write history that is not just local. Okay, so I love local history, and I think it's always going to be a passion that I come back to and that I keep writing about. But I hope that the work that I do, basically, I would like to be able to earn a living out of writing, would be the absolute dream.
So is someone like Dan Snow a bit of a hero?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean that's. I'm not sure if I've got the skills to do the presenting side of things. Who knows? But I just love communicating history, really, and I love the radio. The radio's always been my favourite medium of of entertainment. Ever since I've been a child, I've loved radio and audiobooks and things like that. That's why I came on to doing the podcast, because I just love. I did student radio. I miss doing that. I wanted an excuse to go and record some conversations with people. So yeah, I've kind of lost the thread of what I was saying there. But
just what you would like to see in the future, really. I mean,
sorry, yeah.
I have to say, history drama would be. To be able to mix a podcast and to sort of paint pictures of history, real history, but to sort of almost be there doing it.
I have got an idea which I think is a good idea for a historic fiction, which is something that is a long-term goal for me. Like, it's something that I'm very slowly researching, and kind of it's like a sideline along with other things. But in terms of like making a living from what I'm doing, I've just over the past few months just started going freelance, and I've started doing some research projects for people. I'm currently doing a research project for the New Wolsey Theatre, with their follow-up to the Our Blue Heaven
Because you worked
show.
on Our Blue Heaven, didn't you?
Yes, I was the researcher for that show, and now there's a follow-up show which I have checked and I am allowed to talk about, which is like a UEFA Cup win from the 40th anniversary from the win of the UEFA Cup. So I'm starting to research that, and that's hopefully going to be a really, well, it already is, but it's going to be a really interesting project for the town, I think.
Because the original stories, I mean, you just pick real stories. It's fantastic because it's almost touchable history, isn't it?
I can guarantee you that pretty much everything that's in the Our Blue Heaven storyline, all the characters and the plot points, were all based on real things
stories
that happened that we had submitted, and people that I went and interviewed to sort of find out the details about and that kind of thing.
So for that, it's not too difficult to research in the sense, you can get people's stories, but you can also look at the old newspaper reviews and all those things, can't
That's
you?
where we start. So I've already, for the UEFA Cup one, gone through the Evening Star basically for the whole of the football season and pulled out some interesting stories and that kind of thing. But we are actually still looking for submissions from people's memories as well, from perhaps if they went abroad for the first time with the UEFA Cup final and that kind of thing. And I will dig out an email address for you later on to give that to, because that they're still seeking more submissions for that.
Yeah, and you might have met and got engaged away.
Absolutely, anything that's funny, anything that's like just out of the ordinary.
Mr. Journey Home, or
exactly.
Mr. Matt, because you were busy in the pub, or any of those things.
Exactly.
Okay, so that would be lovely. And I know that you're also looking at the idea of a digital history trail. Are we allowed to talk about that?
Yes, I can.
I've actually done some work with John Royal in his Chronicle company as well.
I've also.
Do feel free to use my voice again if you ever need it.
That's fine. I might have to take you up on that. So John Royal, who's if people don't know, is he runs an organisation called Chronicle, which is like a digital storytelling company, and he's done some brilliant work already, like lots of sort of recollection boxes for.
It's often if you want to your memories and so on, if you want to leave some stories behind.
He's developed these amazing things that are so great for people, potentially early onset dementia, that kind of thing, where you can record your stories and have them for your family and attach them to photographs that are relevant and that kind of thing. That you can basically just scan a photograph and it can be you telling your story about the things in the photograph. So he's really he does all kinds of things, but one of the things that him and I have teamed up on to begin working on is a digital history trail for the town, and we're looking at several different ideas, one of which at the moment is about sort of looking at the animals in the architecture and stuff of the town centre, off the success of so many things like the Elmer Trail, for example, that we had just last year, or the Pigs Gone Wild a few years ago. People love animals, first of all, and if you can combine that with the history of the town and give a nice trail for families to
becomes a bit like but that become like a treasure hunt as well, wouldn't
exactly
it?
That's the
for
idea.
People to do together.
So basically the idea is you have it on your phone as an app, and then when you get to certain locations, your phone will interact with that location and that will unlock something for you, maybe like photographs or audio recordings or whatever, and then you can sort of engage with the history of that thing wherever it is in the town centre.
Technology gives us so many opportunities, doesn't it?
Yeah.
As you found with your podcast as well. So if you end up doing national history and telling the stories nationally, have you got an era that you favourite, that you're particularly passionate about, or people, or?
I think, I do have the 1600s is my favourite century, and I think that probably comes from the fact that I studied that a lot at university, and I just find that whole area of discovery of the New World absolutely fascinating, because it's the whole sort of culture clash of these civilizations coming together, and the way that people reacted to that is really fascinating. So that's really interesting. But I'm quite I often find like people's stories interesting, so I don't know whether it would be the case that I perhaps followed the story of a person, or try and find the goal is always to find a story that hasn't been told already, isn't it? So I think probably I'd be trying to do that kind of thing, where I just sort of unearth an interesting story and follow that through.
I know historical fiction really popular, isn't it? Because you can learn so much, but then novelists can make the rest up, can't they? Which is probably not what you're going to do. Well, I guess you could do, couldn't
I
you?
think there's a mix of that. I've had a slight idea, which I won't go into at the moment, but it's loosely based on events that happened, but a local event that happened during the Second World War, and in Suffolk, and that's kind of the premise for it. But then where it branches off, as you say, you can be creative and do what you want with, really. It's
brilliant. Have you got a website or anything if people want to follow what you do?
So I have a local history website, which is www.ipswichhistory, all one word, .wordpress.com. I've also recently started an Instagram thread where you can follow me on that, and that's howdyougo_history. And I've started, because I've got like a 9 years worth of archive of images now, I've started uploading those so people can have a look sort of before and after photographs of the town, or maps, or whatever, things like that, really. So but I've just started doing that. So
tell me more about the podcast. It's Ipswich History Podcast, and people can get that online, can't they? So if you just Google Ipswich History Podcast, or you can go on iTunes, Spotify,
Spotify, anything like that. If you just type in Ipswich History Podcast, it will come up. There's not many of them.
What have you done so far? So Basil Brown was
Basil Brown was the first episode, and then I also interviewed David Jones, who wrote a book about witchcraft in the 1600s.
What's that museum?
He did once.
He did.
I think he's retired now, but yeah. But I met up with him and recorded a conversation with him about Mary Lackland and the witch trials in East Anglia. So that's the second episode. And at the moment, I've kind of made contact with. It's a little bit of a break because I did this kind of like the second episode like autumn last year or something. But as I'm sure you probably know, all this stuff takes a long time to go and like organise recordings
sorted,
of people,
especially when you're working and everything else as well.
And I've got this idea that I'd like to release a sort of a bit of a series, so sort of have like a mini series, like 4 or 5 episodes. So I'm kind of in the process at the moment of speaking to a few people about potential interviews and things that we can talk about and research for some interesting stories. So that's kind of where I am at the moment with that. So hopefully in the next few months there'll be something.
Watch this space.
Watch this space for that. But you can obviously subscribe, and then whenever it turns up, it will just come into your inbox or whatever. Really.
And you've got your book Ipswich in 50 Buildings.
Yeah,
was that hard to restrict it to 50 buildings?
It was actually. In the introduction to the book, I say when I first sat down to do it, I thought, how am I going to find 50 buildings in Ipswich? It's not that big a town. But then quite quickly, I realised that is not the problem. The problem was going to be choosing which 50. There was far more that I could have included, and I know one gentleman was quite disappointed that I didn't include the Lido on Broomhill
Baths. Yeah.
I think just purely because it's still in a little bit of a
still hasn't been done yet.
It's still in a state of disrepair, isn't it? But of course that is another fantastic place that hopefully in the future will be up and running again.
We'll do it in 51 buildings.
Yeah, maybe second edition, maybe.
So was there an unusual building in there? One that maybe some of us don't know about?
Well, one that I didn't know about before I started was Manor House, actually, which is not it's more the people connected to it than anything, because you had what's the name of the lady, Margaret Catchpole, is that her name? Hang on.
The one who went
to Australia.
Yes.
Yes. So anyway, when she left to go from that house, so basically she stole a horse.
She went on the horse. She rode
did,
a
yeah,
horse.
and she ran away, and of course this whole, basically like novels to be written about her and all sorts of things. And she lived in this house with the Cobbold family because that's where they were based. And I just didn't know that at all. And it's just opposite St Margaret's Church.
Was she their servant?
Yeah, she was a servant of them. And the mistress of the house, Mrs Cobbold, she sort of intervened for her in the trials and stuff, because she had this fascinating life where she stole this horse and went off to meet her lover in London or something, and then 2 or 3 times she got put in prison, got out of prison, got put back in again. Eventually she was condemned to death, and then eventually she was allowed to go to Australia instead.
And she had quite a reasonable life in Australia.
She
didn't
did,
she, as
yeah.
Well? Like, she lived quite an elderly lady, I think.
She
which
did,
is fascinating.
and I think she was a thoroughly reformed lady in Australia. So yeah, she seemed to have lived a relatively happy life after she.
Maybe she's your. I mean, she'd make great. But lots of people have done this side of the water, I think, haven't we?
Yes, yeah.
So the Manor House.
That was an interesting one that I didn't know about myself. Yeah. But I mean, there are loads. I mean, I kind of take for granted all the because I'm just so used to them now. But I mean, Wolsey's Gate, that wasn't included in the book, but I always think that's a fascinating story that a lot of people still don't seem to know about.
We drive past it regularly if you go through the by the docks, don't you? And people probably just pass it and don't even take any notice of it anymore.
Well, I saw that it was in the news the other day because I think they're cleaning it and restoring it. Yeah, but there's loads of fascinating stories. I mean, the story, if people don't know about that, is that Cardinal Wolsey commissioned this college to be built in Ipswich. And if history had taken a slightly different turn, Ipswich might have been a university town like Oxford or Cambridge, but because he fell from power at that point, when he couldn't get the annulment for Henry VIII, he basically... all this stuff just got destroyed and got rid of, and that included his college that he was having built in Ipswich, and this gate that was once the sort of water entrance to the gate to the college is the only thing that's left of it now, really. Sort of 500 years later.
It's fascinating. Yeah. Ipswich really has a lot of history. It really is. I know people say, "Oh, Ipswich," but in fact, when you start to look at recent history, old history, it's a phenomenal place, isn't it? We've got to look out for you on Channel 4, I gather.
Yes. So I did a TV bit for Channel 4 and the Bone Detectives. They're doing a programme about the dockside of Ipswich and potentially, well, I suppose I shouldn't probably give away too much of what happens in it, but
No, don't. I was going to say, but
I'll probably get in trouble with them. But no, but they basically asked me to sort of come and talk to them about the history of the docks at a certain period in time, sort of the Anglo-Saxon period sort of docks. So yeah, I did a little bit for TV last summer that was recorded, and I think the next episode, I think it's one of the next episodes that's coming out probably within the next couple of months or so.
you must let me know if you know, because sometimes these things sort of come and go and we never know they're going to happen,
tweet
do
you.
Tweet us and we can watch out. So that'll be exciting for you, won't it?
Yeah.
Do you get to see it before they put it out or not?
No, I haven't seen the edit or anything, so it'll be as interesting to me as anybody else. Hopefully I haven't made too much of a mess up of it.
I'm sure you haven't. I'm sure. How exciting. So it's the Bones Detective Channel 4 we have to listen. Right, so one more bit of business. First of all, give me the website, because we talked earlier on about how you're researching for the new Wolsey. They're doing their sort of run-up to Our Blue Heaven. This is all about the UEFA Cup. And
Yes.
So if you've got memories, you've got things that happened to you, if you went on the tour, or maybe you didn't go on any of those stories you would like to hear, wouldn't you?
Any interesting stories you've got about your experience or memories of the UEFA Cup run, that would be absolutely brilliant. The email address you can send those into is 1981 itfc@gmail.com. So that's 1981 itfc@gmail.com.
Brilliant. So there we go. I think we've done everything else that we need to do. Confession.
Well, my confession is that I've once won a rap battle, which
A rap
battle, which may not be so obvious with a local historian. When I was at high school, we had an RE teacher called Dr. Donovan, who was an amazing RE teacher, and he used to do little raps to help people remember things for exams and things, about the RE lessons that he was teaching. And at GCSE, our sort of last year, and when we had our Leavers Assembly, quite a few people put themselves forward to say, well, we'll have a rap battle with you for the Leavers Assembly. But one by one, they all dropped out, and it ended up just being just me and Dr. D, or Dr. Donovan, as he was.
He sounds an amazing teacher.
He was an amazing
though.
teacher.
How
He was an amazing
fantastic.
teacher. So anyway, he would come in and do these raps, and he got all dressed up as a rapper, and so did I.
And did you have time to? You had time to write it all and create
I wrote it all. I'm not that good. I'm not freelance, so I just wrote down some. I think he came in and he did some of his RE raps basically, whereas I was under the impression that it was going to be a bit of a takedown, so I was just writing rude things about Dr. D, which was I look back on it now and was, oh dear, poor guy. So I can say that I've won a rap battle. I've won a 3-round rap battle. I won 2 of the 3 rounds. So yeah.
Who voted then?
It was based on general cheer from the crowd.
So I guess they were mostly on your side, not his. But
Possibly. I probably had them on my side, being a pupil rather than a teacher, probably.
That sounds amazing. Well done. Is that to date is your claim to fame, is it?
That's probably one of the things I'm most proud of.
Excellent. Well, we'll watch this space, so look out for you on Channel 4. Thank you for coming in.
Well, thank you for having me.